Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Outlander is the Stars TV, Sony, Tall Ships, and maybe some other production companies' show about Scottish people in pre-revolutionary America, only complicated by time travel and other things. Now, before I get into the review, I just wanted to mention a wee thing. Now, obviously, we're in a really difficult time in the world at the moment, and I kind of worry about you guys. And I have mentioned that I have a Patreon before, but what I want to say is I'm actually totally okay with people stopping paying at the moment. Because the thing is, I don't make my living out of this, and I kind of want everyone to be safe and have enough money. So if you feel like you can't pay, stop. I mean, if you're insanely rich, then, please sign up and give me loads of money. But I mean, most people aren't. So for normal folk, it's totally okay. I understand. I won't feel bad about it. These are strange times we live in. What I would ask though is maybe if, since everyone's got a little bit more time, like this video when you watch it if you enjoy my channel, even if you don't agree with me maybe, and comment below and subscribe to my channel because I do put out a lot of content. I mean, you might not realise it, but I actually do loads of other shows as well as Outlander. I mean, I've done loads in the past, lots of different ones, and you can find them all in the playlist bit on my YouTube page. And currently, I'm just looking at the last couple of episodes of Star Trek Picard. So if you're watching that, check out those videos. And if you watch Westworld, I've just started doing Westworld Season 3. And I'd really love it if you all watch those shows and, watch my reviews on them. I mean, it really helps my channel if you do these things and if you like and subscribe and all that stuff people always say and click the little bell. I'm not sure what it does, but yeah. But other than that, keep well, stay safe. And sorry for breaking up the video with that at the beginning. But for now, let's just get on with the show. Episode 6, Better to Marry Than Burn, starts out with a flashback to Bonnie, Scotland. Yeah, we're back in the 1740s, just after Culloden, and a bunch of folk in a carriage are tearing down the road, only to bump into a pair of dragoons. And it turns out the people there are Jocasta, her husband, and their wee lassie. But the soldiers manage to realise that they're Jacobites, and in the scuffle, the wee lassie accidentally gets shot dead, and they have to ditch her body and ride off. Meanwhile, back in the present, it's actually the day before Jocasta's upcoming wedding to this tall drink of water, and I don't think anyone's under any illusions on either side that this is out but a convenience hitch. Still, one aspect to Jocasta getting married is she needs to make sure that the signature's down so that Jemmy's birthright is secured, and luckily, Jamie, Joa herself, and Ulysses have captured a passing hobbit, and it seems like it's a splendid little affair, with dancing and every lassie in the place is really hot for Lord John, who seems rightly uncomfortable with it all. And Jamie and Claire end up chatting with Tryon and his wife, and it's all a bit drab and dull for the ladies, so they nip off and the boys talk about pardons and war and all kinds of things. But then Claire finds herself like the victim of Mr. Ponsonby McTerrifying, or I think his name's actually Wiley, and he is a wily rogue, and he looks like an absolute ghastly fright, and he clearly fancies the pants off her, and he just won't let it alone and keeps bothering her. And Claire's all like, okay pal, but then he mentions that he knows an Irish smuggler called Bonnet, and she's all like, oh, that's interesting, maybe we can talk about this. So he takes her off to see his horsey, and then he tries to show her his pony, and she's having absolutely none of it, and luckily Jamie comes barreling in, and he's pure ready to end him, but then Claire calms him down and explains things. And luckily there's a major gambling thing set for that evening, and the toff is all about getting himself some bit of cheese because he's in debt, and Jamie challenges him, but he'll only agree to play if it's for Claire's wedding ring, the one that Frank gave her, and she's absolutely mortified that Jamie would agree to gamble such a thing, so in the end she hands him both rings and storms off in a huff. And of course Jamie wins, because he was always going to. And then he's managed to set up a meet with Bonnet under the fake smuggler name A. Malcolm. So they now have an opportunity to actually go and take him out. And this is Jamie and Claire, so like normal, their little lover's tiff turns into a bit of old rumpy bumpy, and then everything's pretty much as good as new. And elsewhere, Jocasta's got to the end of her pre-wedding eve thing, and she's just about to go to bed when Murtaugh turns up unexpectedly, and he's decided that now is the time to propose and declare his undying love. And quite rightly, she turns him down, explaining that she's not young and she's done stuff in her life, and at this point she needs basically security and peace in her later years, not gallivanting about with an outlaw warrior. Now, it's kind of a bitter end for both of them, but it's a sensible move, and they both know that in other circumstances they could have probably been together. Oh. And meanwhile, back at the ridge, Roger and Bree notice an upkick in the insect population, and it appears that things have gone a bit biblical and there's plagues of locusts on the way, and Roger has a moment of being a bit pants, and when he's asked what to do, but as Jamie's representative. But then he remembers a story his dad used to read him, and he starts making up some kind of turds and goose fat sort of surprise and burning it with green wood around the fields of crops. And no, it's not witchcraft, it just basically makes the locust go, ew, that stinks, and fly away. And it works, and they manage to stave off the giant horde of nasties. And then everyone's his new best friend, even his wife. And just in case you thought things might average out happy at the end of an episode of Outlander, Lord Tryon summons Jamie to his pavilion and tells him that actually it looks like war's coming after all, and there's going to be a great big fight between them and the Regulators, and a fight that the Regulators have absolutely no chance of winning. Oh well. And on top of that, the Hobbit bumps into Aragorn on the way back home. They must be on the way to some kind of convention. And he mentions to him that actually his lad Jemmy might have just come into a whole bunch of money. Dun dun dun! So what did I think? Well, I actually really enjoyed this week's episode. I mean, honestly, I think I had more laughs and giggles in the first half of this episode than I've had watching this show for about 3 seasons. I mean, everything from that bit at the beginning with Jocasta and Ulysses and the little looks and everything, all that stuff with like Claire and Mrs. Tryon, and that amazing job that the guy was doing, like playing Philip Wiley. I mean, that guy was brilliant, as the powdered and garish fop. He's an absolute scream. And he totally looks like a complete fright. And all the over-the-top mugging and mannerisms, they really sell it. I mean, it's just this side of being completely over the top. And I love how everything was absolutely wrong with his costume to make it look so completely perfectly awful in the best way. I mean, speaking of costumes, I mean, they really went all out. I mean, look at this. I'm a guy who appreciates a nice suit, and, or a kilt or something like that. But even I was like, wow. I mean, look at Jamie in his grey suede. It's the height of fashion. Oh no, look, Lord John rocking that interview with the vampire realness in his crushed red velvet. And the judge. I love that he's wearing judge's robes, kind of, but not quite. I mean, but seriously, no, honestly, hats off to the costume and makeup folks. It all looked absolutely smashing. I really loved it. But I also thought that, like, Sam and Kat's wee tiff, I mean, that was really well done. It made sense as them having an argument, and it kind of harked back to the days of season 1 and 2, and especially when they would squabble with each other as much as with everyone else. And especially about the thing about the rings, because that made sense. I mean, let's be honest about it. He's trying to get back at Bonnet. There's kind of a poetic symmetry to this, because remember back at the beginning of season 4, Bonnet tried to steal both the rings off of Claire, and she had to swallow one of them. And yeah, and remember everything that happened from that. So it's kind of ironic and symbolic that Jamie's using those rings to get back at him and find out where he is so he can go up and do a nasty on him. I like that idea. And of course, it would upset Claire. And you think Jamie would understand that. But the point is, it was a really interesting scene. And I really liked how it was done. I think it made sense for the characters. And I think the sex scene afterwards, I mean, it was a little inevitable and a wee bit contrived. And it was as awkward and as weird as sex can be sometimes. I mean, Jamie going a bit like, look at what I'm doing. It was a bit funny and a bit cringy, but I mean, be honest, like, sex is funny and a bit cringy sometimes. But then it did make me wonder, like, why Claire was still hanging out in the stable, like, that time of the evening. I mean, why wasn't she in bed or having a dram? And basically, it's because clearly they wanted to have a sex scene in a stable. Because, I mean, why not? I mean, they first started hanging out in a stable back in season 1. Anyway, but it was fine. I enjoyed that. I thought the wee moment afterwards where they kind of made up and talked, it was fine. And another thing that really worked was actually the Murta and Jocasta storyline. The one thing I did think was halfway through the episode, I was like, why did they have that flashback at the start? I don't get where that fits in at all. And then you've got that mammoth scene with, like, paying it off. And it is a big scene, like, both in length and in the emotional range that the actors, like, draw on to actually do that scene. I mean, it reminded me a lot like the first episode of the season when the two of them, like, woke up after the wedding and they had the little sort of post-coital chat. I mean, I think this is a nice mirror to that scene. And I think, like, Maria Kennedy Doyle really nailed it like a champ. She's fantastic. I'm really, really loving her work this season. And the guilt and the pain that you see really coming from her, like, it feels really genuine. And she's bouncing off Duncan brilliantly. And, I haven't always had the best things to say about Duncan Lacroix, but he was great in this scene. He did really well. And I also kind of like the Roger storyline, the Roger actually doing something for a change and succeeding. I mean, genuinely, it actually makes a change. But there's never good without bad, and I got to be honest, while this week wasn't really a bad episode, there were some things that stuck out to me. I mean, Roger's faulty memory, like, I'm sorry, okay, Locust is quite a random thing. So suddenly Locust appearing, and then presumably the time it took them to get everybody from the Ridge into the house to have a chat about it. I don't buy that Roger wouldn't have racked his memories and remembered, like, the one story he knew about locusts. Because, I mean, let's face it, I mean, I read a book about locusts. Well, not even about locusts. I read a book where it mentioned that you can cook locusts and you keep them in the fridge overnight, and then you take the arms and legs and the wings off and they break the heads off, and then you can fry them up in some things. I read that when I was 5 in a book. Maybe not 5, maybe a bit older. And the book was called How to Hold a Crocodile. Sorry, totally random bit of information there. But right, I remember that. And if somebody mentions locusts, that's the first thing I think of because it's the only thing I actually know about locusts. And the one story that he knows about that, it took him walking out and looking at a fire before he thought about it. I don't buy it. It felt like it was just there so that he could have that little moment where he looks at the thing and goes, After already had the moment where everyone goes, "You're just not good enough," like Captain Mackenzie. So yeah, that was a wee bit clunky. And right, another thing, which is a completely different bit. See back at the start in the scene where like Morna or Moana or whatever her name is, I never quite got it. That scene, the bit where she died, was kind of sloppily put together. It looked kind of weird. I mean, and I'm sure it's awkward and expensive to do like a headshot effect, and it can be quite gruesome. But like these guns, like, and I know that they're notoriously bad aim, like they weren't very accurate. But either Hector is a terrible shot, or he just wasn't really paying attention because the way the scene was put together, it didn't actually look like she was that close. It looked like he shot and he just shot at her rather than shot at the other guy because the way the blood splats on him makes it look like she's still a few feet away from him. And yeah, it just, I know I got what they were going for, but it just didn't work for me. And at the other end of the show, I felt kind of like it skipped a lot. I mean, right, at first it confused me because of the whole thing about the wedding, and they didn't really explain it. And I suppose this is probably makes more sense in the book, but it was the day before the wedding. It wasn't the actual wedding day itself. So they're having a party the whole day before. And it feels like these festivities are happening, but then they kind of get shortcutted because of the story. And we see Lord John and then he disappears. I mean, were there more scenes of him they cut? I mean, why even bothering getting him to come down to film for the day for such a tiny little cameo? I mean, it seems like an odd choice, but whatever. I mean, I'm sure David Berry's happy to be working. But similarly, I mean, I assume that the opening scene was actually the night before and that was going to be the wedding day. But then she's like, at the end of the episode, she's like, oh, I'm getting married tomorrow. And I was like, oh, so that was the morning of that day? Okay, why was it so dark? So yeah, that confused me a little bit. But I mean, ultimately, at the end of it, I kind of enjoyed the show. And I think since the current like plague has got everybody indoors like watching a lot more TV and stuff, so Twitter's has been a bit bonkers with people talking about this episode already, even though it technically doesn't come out in the UK until tonight. Now, quite a lot of folk, including herself, said she didn't like the stable scene. And I've got to ask why. I mean, I don't read the book, so I don't know why, but it seemed kind of like a non-entity of a scene. I mean, I did explain earlier that I thought it was a really interesting concept about the rings and stuff, but why was this a big scene? I mean, also the lighting on this scene looked really weird. It looked like what it probably was. It looked like this was a modern stable that they just, chucked a few props in and stuff because it seemed like because of the light that almost like that had a perspex roof or something. It was far too bright in there and it didn't feel like the usual Outlander visual style when, you're indoors somewhere and it's kind of a bit dark. It just looked like a modern place and it totally threw me a wee bit. But ultimately, it wasn't really, that big a deal. The rest of the episode was fairly good. I did think the bit with Bonnet at the end was a little bit contrived. I'm getting tired of Bonnet suddenly flying off the handle at people in a predictable way. But still, his acting's fine, and it's really nice to see, Pippin from Lord of the Rings as always. I mean, he's a good actor. It's good to see him getting some work. But yeah, it was an interesting episode. And before I go, please remember that you can join the Facebook group and follow me on Twitter, and as well as you can join up to my Patreon. But as I said earlier, I won't feel bad if you don't. But yeah, at this time, it would actually be really good. So, I mean, if we get more traffic on the Facebook page, or if not, if you're part of like another Facebook Outlander group, if you share this video there, then more people will get to see it. We'll get more people chatting. We'll get it going. The channel does better, and then everyone has a better time at this point when we're all pulling together and trying to give each other things to do to fill up the time while we're all in lockdown. I'll keep the content coming. So yeah, remember, you can always watch my Droughtlander videos or some of my other reviews. The Westworld series just started up, so if you're a loose end, there'll be a link below, and I'll put one up at the end of the video as well. So till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.